Indianapolis Colts defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo labeled himself as a truth teller today in his opening press conference. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd of HorseshoeHuddle.com, and my partner Jake Arthur is, of course, our credentialed Crocs on the ground for the site as well. Today, we're talking all about Lou Anarumo's opening press conference for the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts introduced him as the new defensive coordinator today, bright and early at 9 a.m., Jake, and Jake was out there, obviously, as our Crocs on the ground, showing off those beautiful Crocs that he obviously is wearing to all of those press conferences. But today we're going to talk about what really stood out to us. I know coaches don't say too much in these press conferences, but reading between the lines a little bit and reading into a little bit of what he said, we're going to look into kind of what really stood out to us. So, Jake, what was the biggest thing that really popped for you being there in person, listening to Lou Anarumo?
Yeah, let's put some words in Sweet Lou's mouth, right? No. So right off the bat, so he was asked, how is he going to put his stamp on the defense? What does it look like for him and everything? Very coach speaky for a defensive coordinator. He said smart, fast, physical, which I think I've heard every defensive coordinator ever say. But when he went into a little more detail about it, what he said, I really liked. Because this is a guy who, again, is used to facing Joe Burrow every day in practice. He had to go against Lamar Jackson twice a year, and then you added Derrick Henry on top of that. So he wants to take a lot of the mental stuff off the plate of the players, let them play freely without the burden of constantly having to process just unnecessary things mentally. And to me, that kind of takes them back to the Matt Eberflus days. Eberflus himself maybe eventually rubbed some guys the wrong way, but as far as his system goes, guys did like to play for him because they were able to use their instincts and play freely, click and close, get to the ball quickly, and just play based on instincts and not assignment, essentially. And to me, it sounds like that's what Anarumo would really like to accomplish for his players is, give them a game plan, make them as prepared as possible so they know everything they can about the upcoming opponent, and then just let the players go from there and react to what they're seeing, but also anticipate ahead of time. To me, it sounds like most of the work and the assignment is going to be in the preparation. If you're prepared, then there aren't many surprises and you're able to play freely. If you're learning a bunch of crap on the go, like game day of, that's going to be a problem. Now, he can make adjustments, but it's all about the game plan for him, which is awesome. We've seen a lot of instances with the Colts previously where it's the same game plan week after week, no matter who the opponent is for the most part. But with Anarumo, it's very tailored to each week and each opponent. So, again, the details in the week leading up is what are going to help get him to getting these players playing without the restraints of all the mental stuff that, I think, especially when you look at young players, when they have to process too much stuff and not just be football players and use their natural abilities, that's what takes some guys so long to adapt to the NFL. So I think if he can just get, especially some of these young guys, like I'm thinking of Latu in particular, that's one guy, Jalen Carlisle's young guys who are probably going to play a lot of snaps. If he can get them to where they're just playing football, then their natural ability should take over and they can be really effective players.
Yeah, and I think kind of when you hear that, like, keep things simple and stuff like that and let the guys play fast, it does remind you a lot of the Matt Eberflus and even Gus Bradley to a degree, but the simplicity, the way to get to that simplicity, I think is very different from Lou Anarumo to, say, a Gus Bradley. In Gus Bradley, the simplicity is in the scheme. We do these couple things really well. We're going to get to our spots. And even if quarterbacks know what we're doing, we're going to be so good in what we're doing that it's hard for them to beat it. That's kind of that philosophy, where I think with Anarumo, the simplicity more so comes in. We don't have to think too much on the field because we're so ready for this game plan in this particular matchup against this particular quarterback that when we see, hey, front shoulders going left against our cover 3, we know that he's going to throw this out route here. This is where we need to, this is how we can read and react from there. So I think the route to get to the simplicity is a little bit different with Anarumo compared to, say, a Gus Bradley, where the simplicity is in the scheme itself, and you're kind of sitting kind of that one coverage all day. With Lou Anarumo, it's more so in the preparation. We get you so ready for these games and certain game plans that it feels simple on the field, if that makes sense. Feels simple in terms of quarterback does this, quarterback shows this, the offense is in 12 personnel doing a play action. We know exactly what kind of bootleg type stuff is coming. That is more so where the simplicity comes with Lou Anarumo compared to past defensive coordinators we had here. One thing that really stood out to me, though, and it's kind of along the same line as what you were talking about there, Jake, but it does go towards being multiple and being more flexible, is when he really talked about his success against, the Pat Mahomeses, the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons, and heck, even the Joe Burrow every day in practice, is you have to be multiple against these good quarterbacks. And we didn't really see it this past year with his defense because, again, we've gone into so much detail about this. Like, that defense was kind of picked dry over the last couple of seasons with all the talent departure. But back in his heyday in the 2021, 2022 type season, when he had success against good offenses, we saw his defenses be multiple, be unique, diverse, and really pull the rug out on some good quarterbacks. Like I mentioned, Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes. And he mentioned in his press conference that, like, even the best quarterbacks, you're not going to fool them all day, but if you sit in the same coverage snap after snap, they're going to know where to go with that ball and they're going to pick you apart. So you just have to make them, think a little bit extra. You have to make them, be uncertain at times and make these guys sweat a little bit because they are such a good quarterbacks. And I think one thing that really stood out too is that he mentioned being in our conference in the AFC. In the AFC, we have the gauntlet of quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I mean, outside of Jaden Daniels in the NFC, like, a lot of the best quarterbacks in football are sitting in the AFC right now, including easily the top 3 quarterbacks in football, and Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Pat Mahomes. And heck, even Joe Burrow, if you want to say he's the 4th best, that's the top 4 quarterbacks in the league right here in the AFC. So if you ever want to have a chance, you have to beat those guys or at least slow them down a little bit. Lou Anarumo has a history of fairly good success against those guys, especially in the playoffs. And I love how he talked about, again, being multiple, having to fool them, having to throw a variety of coverages at them, because if they are going to see you in the same coverage all game long, these guys are too darn good for that. They're way too good for that. They will make you pay for sitting in the same coverage. So he kind of evolved as a defensive coach into being multiple because of the rise of quarterbacks like these guys in recent seasons.
Yeah, I think that's important. And it's also a lesson that I feel he's learned. I talked to Ben Baby earlier in the week, who covered Anarumo's entire tenure in Cincinnati. And one thing that really helped lead to the defense's emergence last year, like, they were terrible most of the year, and then the last handful of games, they really turned it on, was sticking with the zone coverage and then eventually going to man and just, pulling the plug and making that adjustment. And it seemed to really work. And, the defense was getting home. And of course, Trey Hendrickson was playing out of his mind, but his ability to adapt and just not be as stubborn. Now, it's part of what got them in that situation in the first place, but he was willing to make that adjustment and it worked for them. So being able to do that and kind of pulling out the rug from those opposing quarterbacks to where they think they know what you're going to do and then just totally switching it up. But even just throughout a game, like you mentioned, like, if you're just sitting in your zones, like, they're going to know where the zone beaters are and how the tight end is going to manipulate the seams and everything. But if you change things up, even quarter to quarter, like, it can keep guys on their toes and make them maybe take some more chances that could lead to mistakes.
Yeah, the best way I would describe it is, and I'm not the biggest baseball fan, so maybe you guys can correct me here, but this is like a pitcher having multiple pitches that they can rely on. Maybe they're not all like elite perfect pitches, but having a good fastball, a good curveball, a good changeup, a good this, like being good at a lot of different pitches rather than being just a fastball pitcher. You know,
Mhm.
Gus Bradley, I think in his perfect world is the perfect like fastball pitcher. Like I'm only going to throw a fastball, but it's going to be such a good fastball that you're not going to be able to hit it. Where with Lou Anarumo, it's every pitch you don't really know what's coming. It's not going to
Painting
be
the
as good
corners.
as it's not going to be as good as that fastball at their peaks, but it's going to be so different each time that's going to make you think a little bit more and lead to more swings and misses. So that's kind of how I view this style of defense compared to Lou Anarumo's predecessor and predecessors, if you want to go all the way back to Eberflus even. But coming up, guys, we're going to talk about a couple players and positions that really stand out to Lou Anarumo with this Colts defense. He did shout out a couple players by name, which I think is quite interesting.
Therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. But that's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace, the leading virtual therapy provider, makes getting the help that you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours, and it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home or even message your therapist between appointments if you need a little pep talk here and there. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize your mental health. As a listener of this podcast, you'll actually get $80 off of your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL and enter promo code SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL and enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off of your first month and show your support for the show. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code SPACE80. All right, Zach. So the most notable player that Anarumo was working with over, his last few years in Cincinnati is Trey Hendrickson, who was just a demon off of the edge this year, was a demon off the edge against the Colts the year before. So you had something kind of pulled out about maybe what the Colts could provide along the defensive line. They don't necessarily have Trey Hendrickson, but they do have a couple good players there.
Yeah, and he was specifically asked a couple times today about the defensive line, about players on the defensive line. This question was actually more so about Trey Hendrickson, but then I can't remember who asked this question because I was reading the transcripts. But the question asked about DeForest Buckner having that star impact player on the interior with Buckner, and Lou Anarumo did mention that there were two players that really stood out to him on this defensive line. He has one guy on the inside in DeForest Buckner and a guy on the outside in Laiatu Latu, a player who he specifically shouted out, again, not even prompted to really talk about Laiatu Latu here, but he said he really liked him coming out in the draft. And then most of the answer was about Buckner from there. But I did think it was interesting that he specifically talked about Laiatu Latu and even said, hey, we have a guy on the inside and a guy on the outside. So he kind of inferred with that answer that he has Latu, maybe not in the same tier as a DeForest Buckner, but like an impact player on the edge, which I think is quite important. I mean, Laiatu Latu, I think by all accounts was a little disappointing in his first season. Maybe that's because expectations were placed a little bit too high on him. Maybe he played too many snaps as a rookie and so forth. But I do think Anarumo sees the potential there with a guy like Latu, and I'm excited to see how he uses him. I think it's a little bit of a fallacy to say like Trey Hendrickson was this good in Cincinnati, therefore Laiatu Latu will be that good too. I do think that those things are being conflated a little bit, but when we look at how a player is used, with the Colts last year with Gus Bradley, it was defensive ends were primarily in a wide nine all the time, very, very much out on the edges, and both players were kind of treated like Leo defensive ends that were pass rushing at all times. When it comes to Lou Anarumo, it's more traditional in a sense where, your Kwity Pays or your Dio Dangbos on one side will be more 5 technique, 6 technique. Laiatu Latu will be in a 7 technique early, go out to a 9 technique on third downs a lot of times. But, Anarumo kind of mixes it around a little bit. There'll be some 2-point stances from Latu this year. He'll be moving across the defensive line. I saw some really cool packages where a guy like Trey Hendrickson was lined up at linebacker on third downs and was blitzing like some stunts, some really cool exotic stunts that way. So I think he'll take advantage of having a player like Latu next to Buckner in a sense where it won't be as static in terms of, hey, you're going to be lined up against the left tackle or the right tackle on 90% of snaps in that wide nine and just go win your matchup. I think he'll be moving around a little bit and being used more as like a weapon on the defensive line. So I think that's what we can really take away from it. Like, look, Latu's not Trey Hendrickson. I don't expect him to be Trey Hendrickson anytime soon because Trey Hendrickson is a superstar. But I do think the usage-wise, like moving him around the line, 2-point stance, delayed rushes to use that explosiveness, I think we could see a little bit of that next year with Latu.
Yeah, the thing that really worries me about when you compare Latu and Trey Hendrickson is a no-gloves guy, and Latu was a no-gloves guy during the summer before the season. So the aesthetics, I'm really worried that it's just going to be horrendous and Latu might go to no gloves. I mean, but if it works, it works.
I'm a no gloves guy.
Oh,
so I'm all for the no gloves.
God. But no, I mean, I think moving him around would be great. Like I picture like getting him moving around, him and Franklin double blitzing the A gap or something. Like there's a lot of cool things you could do with that. Just move the guy around. He doesn't have to just be the right end every time.
Yeah.
But yeah, move the guy around. You've got some guys on there you could do cool things with. Like I kind of pictured Dio being like the ultimate kind of play thing for Anarumo to figure out things to do with as well. So yeah, I think Latu is definitely someone who could benefit. Now, is he going to jump up to 10 sacks or anything? No, not necessarily, but like 6, 7, 8 sacks building on the 4 sacks he had this year. Because he did have a lot of pressures. He just needed to finish.
Finish your tackles, please.
Yeah.
Latu last season, I think, was third on the team in missed tackle rate at like 19%.
Yeah. He had guys.
Plays.
Yeah, he had quarterbacks in his grasp a lot. Like he had the 4 sacks, but I think he was a little more impactful than that. But no.
Yeah.
That Buckner, I am interested to see early in the season, and especially like in training camp in the preseason, when Latu and Buckner were teamed up next to each other. Now, obviously we saw it during the season, but it was so effective. I don't really know what happened. I think is maybe just, the live bullets hitting and, actual game plans coming into play and offenses knowing what to do. But that does have so much potential. I'm really interested in that. I could see them adding to the defensive line too, because we've discussed, Dio's a free agent. Samson Ebukam, it makes a lot of sense for him to be a cap casualty. So not only Latu and Buckner, but like what might we see brought in this offseason for Anarumo to really do his thing? Yeah. Something else that stuck out to me, and this kind of snowballs off of what I said earlier, but I asked Lou today, is there like a particular position group that if this thing is if you've got everything you need at this position group, then your defense is going to be maximized? And he had already been asked about Jesse Bates, of course, and free safety. So I think free safety makes a lot of sense to him. But rather than really subscribing to one position group, he mentioned guys, he really wants good communicators and smart football players.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm kind of wondering when it comes to Chris Ballard and what he covets in, free agents. I think what he goes for in free agents and draft prospects is a little different, but I wonder if Anarumo is going to lean way more heavily into guys with good instincts and football IQ over guys who are just super freak athletes, which bet on traits. Yes, that is awesome. Like more often than not, those guys are going to have some sort of utility for you, but especially on defense for me, when I'm watching draft prospects before, like if they're always in the right place and if they look like they understand what's happening in front of them and they're not getting victimized and you could just tell they're heady on tape, I think that's what Anarumo covets more than a corner that's 6'2", jumps 40 inches and runs a 4.35. I think he just wants guys that are going to be doing the right thing and being in the right place.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be either or though, which is nice. I mean, you can have
you're going to find guys who can do
Yeah.
it all, you a guy who can do both. But
yeah. Kenny Moore. Kenny Moore,
Yeah.
I think, is one of the smartest players in football. Like when you watch
Absolutely.
his film, super smart player in
Yeah.
terms of his instincts, his ability to understand route combinations and how to bait quarterbacks. Honestly, I want Kenny to take an even more vocal role this season on the defense, just in terms of communication. And I mean, look, you don't do this. The slot corner is not the guy you give this to, but like, even if you have to have him being the guy with the mic in the helmet, like, that's a little too crazy there. But I mean, this is a guy who he's such a heady football player. And we've even had, Zaire Franklin said that his coverage got better this year because he listened to Kenny more
Mm-hmm.
in terms of that. Sam Womack, I believe, has talked about how Kenny really helped with the transition, and how Kenny was key communicating wise, to really maximize him this year. So I want Kenny to even be more vocal on this defense in turn, because I think he's one of the smartest players. And look, if you want to have a system that's built around smart football players, Kenny Moore is your smart football player, like the smart football player, especially in coverage. So that's a little bit on just kind of players that we think Anarumo could really like, and players and aspects that they could be looking for going forward. Coming up, though, I have another film nerd thing that just really stood out to me, and I'm glad he got to talking about this, because I did kind of ask Jake to ask about this, and luckily someone beat Jake to the punch. So some more film nerd stuff on Lou Anarumo coming up in just a second.
From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and they get $300 back in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around for your winnings. So whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel's got you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, hit us, nerd. What did you love, lastly, that Anarumo said when it comes to Kenny Moore?
Yeah, well, I texted you last night, Jake, and I was like, make sure you ask him about Kenny Moore, something around Kenny Moore.
Yeah.
And you didn't. You completely ignored me.
I didn't.
I just, you left me on red, was the problem. But no, somebody asked him
I
today.
responded.
Yeah, you responded to me. Don't worry, guys. But I believe it was, I want to say it was Joel. Joel Erickson asked about Lou Anarumo's blitz numbers going down in his time in Cincinnati.
Yep.
Yeah, and he did say that, it's more of a game by game thing, and it's about matchup, which from my understanding, he likes to blitz like the bad quarterbacks a little bit more, which we'll get into more this offseason, which is kind of funny. But one thing he did really say about this was he liked to bring Mike Hilton off the slot, and we've got a guy that's very similar to him here in Kenny Moore II. So it was kind of a coach speak answer in terms of situation, who we're playing and stuff. But to me, look, we have the data, we have the stats. We know that Lou Anarumo likes to blitz the slot corner, especially Mike Hilton. Mike Hilton was top 3 in pass rush reps among all cornerbacks the last 4 seasons under Anarumo. We know he likes to blitz it, but just the confirmation, just to talk about it, being like, hey, we have a guy like Mike Hilton here in Kenny Moore, the shout out of the player who I've been pounding the table these last couple of days, being like, I'm telling you guys, this is a great fit. Just for him to mention that and talk about the blitzing, which again, Kenny Moore, I think someone said it the other day, Kenny Moore's like top 10, top 12 all time among cornerbacks and sacks in a career. And he's not very old. Like I think he's just turning 30 here soon. So there's still plenty of time to get up to, like, Rondé Barber's like career sack numbers like 25. Kenny's at 15 in his career. So Kenny's a great blitzer. I'm excited to get back to the Kenny Moore blitzes, because Gus Bradley kind of moved away from them. He did start getting back to them a little bit more last season, but if we can get Kenny back up to 50, 60, 70 blitzes a season, which is, I don't have a math brain right here, but that's what, like 4, 5, 6 blitzes a game. Perfect. Bring Kenny off the edge. Let him get after these quarterbacks. I'll never forget that playoff run he had with the Colts back in 2018, where he had like 4 sacks in 2 games in the playoffs.
Yeah. And I remember the 2019, his sack against the Chiefs, where he dipped under the left tackle's reach and got to Mahomes.
Yeah, wasn't that 2018? I think it was 28. No, it was 2019 the
29
fall in the regular season he did
is
have that dip
the
under.
Jacoby
Yeah.
Brissett game, but no, he
Oh
did
my
go on a
gosh.
heater the in 2018 because that's when the
Yeah.
Colts made their last playoff run.
Yeah.
But,
Let him blitz. Let
yeah,
him come off the edge. I just love that Anarumo shouted that out today, that he likes to blitz the slot and he has a player in Kenny Moore that he can do that with this next season. That's what I'm excited for. It's like get Kenny Moore going downhill, make him be that playmaker again, and I think we'll see the best version of Kenny that we've seen since his Pro Bowl season in 2021.
yeah. So last for me here, I asked again, Lou. What do these next few weeks look like for you? Because he just got here, but he's probably not going to be down in Mobile. But like the Senior Bowl is next week, so that's going to be the first huge moment of draft evaluation. He's going to have to be included in that, at least film review of it. You got the combine coming up, but he's still got to fill a staff because linebackers coach Richard Smith is gone, as well as DB's coach Ron Milas. They're always kind of a package deal with Gus Bradley. So basically, what's next for you? And he said, a little bit of everything. He's really going to dive into free agency in the draft. He's got to tell Chris Ballard in the front office, like some guys that, free agency first, obviously. But that they've got to dive into that right away. Like I know he just got here, but the NFL does not slow down. But yeah, he's also going to evaluate players, see who's going to really fit into the scheme, who he can get the most out of, and who they may need to move on from, because that free agency part of it also deals with their own in-house guys.
Yeah.
And then filling that staff and then just kind of laying the groundwork for the playbook and what they really want to establish. He did say that, he's already spoken to several players on the phone. And then, there's been some who are still in the facility that have dropped in and talked to him as well. So they're kind of laying the early groundwork of things right now, expectations. But I think the exciting thing is, we got to get to figure out who these final two position coaches are going to be, and maybe even some more assistants, defensive quality control and assistant, this and that. But the work for him to tell Chris Ballard and the group who they really want in the building, it starts now.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how he fills out his staff here, because unlike with Gus Bradley, we kind of knew everyone that Gus Bradley was going to bring in because Ron Milas and Richard Smith follow him everywhere. We knew those two guys were coming to Indy. Right now, though, there are a couple vacancies on the defensive staff with Gus Bradley departing. And, I think James Betcher is a good bet to be the linebacker coach. I wouldn't say it's 100%, but I think Anarumo's worked with Betcher since 2018. I want to say Betcher hired him to be a DB coach when Betcher was the defensive coordinator for the Giants in 2018. And then when Betcher got let go and Anarumo became the defensive coordinator for the Bengals, it became like this symbiotic, like they just kind of flipped or whatever, and Betcher became the linebacker coach. So they've been working together for a long time. I'd be shocked if Betcher didn't follow him here, especially with Betcher being born in Indiana as well, born and raised here. Yeah, so it seems like a perfect fit. Betcher was actually here coaching in the Colts in 2012, so that one makes sense. But aside from that, DB coach, I'm not really sure who they're going to target. Jordan Kovacs was his safety coach last year with the Bengals. Jordan Kovacs actually played in the NFL a couple years ago as a special team safety. I don't know if he wants to keep that or if he's going to go a different route. So we'll see. We'll see. I know a lot of people want big names on assistant coaching staff. So maybe we see, maybe we see something like that. But I think it'll more so be guys that he's worked with in the past, and we'll see how he fills it out. But yeah, excited to see what Anarumo can do with the staff, do with the players coming back, and which of his guys or which free agency guys he really puts his stamp on, because they do need some veteran help. I think they need some veteran help at outside corner, definitely at free safety, and probably another one at linebacker too. So who are the guys that he's really going to pound the table for? That'll be a big thing this offseason.
Zach and I are actually going to start pounding the table for dudes as well, because, we've talked to death about defensive coordinator candidates and Anarumo specifically all this week. We want to start moving into some player acquisition stuff as well. So draft picks we like, free agents we like. The Senior Bowl's next week. I'll be down in Mobile, so I'll have stuff for you guys every single day down there. So yeah, the draft season starts now. Free agency is even before that. So we're pumped. If there's guys that you like and want us to kind of dive into, let us know as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna become the Tyler Warren to Indianapolis Locked On show, basically,
There's
because that's
3 options in the first round: Tyler Warren, Malachi Starks, or if they go back, Xavier Watts. That's your 3 options.
I haven't even heard many about the other 2 though, because everything has been Tyler Warren to Indy. I feel like at this point we're gonna have a riot in Indy if
Very
Tyler
important.
Warren doesn't come to Indy.
Yeah.
But yeah, you guys let us know in the comment section what you think of Lou Anarumo, and also, again, what you think of Tyler Warren to Indy. Of course, that's obviously the biggest topic this offseason. But we want to thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. Next, go find Locked On NFL. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. And if you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat with us directly and get that insider scoop, follow the link in our show notes. And if you don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We love you guys, ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.